and Karl Rove. Karl, there's so much to talk about here. How were you struck by it? It was like 40 minutes of nothing to see here.
Yeah, well, I have two. Step back for a minute, and I have two conclusions. One is that the ordinary American is going to sit there and say, I don't understand why President Trump was indicted and why President Biden wasn't, and they're going to be confused, and they may not see all the differences and the nuances that Mr. Sams laid out. And so this is going to undermine, I believe, public confidence in the indictment of President Trump. The other thing that I'd say, and there are real differences, you know, there are real differences between the two, but to the ordinary American, it's going to seem confusing. The second thing is we can't unhear what we've heard. And what we heard in the report was that President Biden has memory problems and cannot recall common details. And then we had the president's angry response last night in about a 16-minute-long televised newser with the White House press corps, which made it worse, where he conflated, confused the president of Mexico with the president of Egypt and said things that are very hard for us to get our hands around. He talked about how he'd been asked about when his son died and said, I said to myself at the time, why the hell are they asking? It's none of their business. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. So we can't unhear what we've heard. And what we've heard is that all of our concerns that have led 3/4 of the American people to think that he's too old and 2/3 of the American people to think that he lacks the mental acuity and sharpness and stamina to be effective as president, those things are going to simply be elevated by what we've seen and heard in the last 24 hours.
I don't know. If you're behind closed doors at the White House right now, Karl, I mean, I don't know. What does the president do next year? What does his team do?
Well, I was shocked, for example, that they put him out last night. Look, he's old, and he doesn't get better over the course of the day. So who told him he had to go out immediately, as opposed to, you know, coming out this morning when he was a little bit more fresh and could have a little bit more time to consider what he said? He just didn't look good last night, and it showed, and we saw it. So change the subject. But the problem is, in order to change the subject, you have to get the president out there. Think about this. Last time we had him do a televised news interview, October. Last time he did a news conference, November, at the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation meeting, and he took 4 questions. He's not doing the Sunday Super Bowl interview that presidents have historically done. He won South Carolina. He didn't go out and declare victory. He announced the attacks were made, response was made to the Houthis. He didn't go out and talk to the American people about it. He ordered attacks on the Iranian proxies when they killed 3 American service people. He didn't go out and talk to the American people about it. But somehow or another, somebody last night said, you've got to go out and talk immediately about this. And whoever advised him on that ill-served him. He should have taken his time. And we need to hear from him more on other things if he hopes to change the subject. And that may make the problem worse, not better.
You know, Karl, there were 2 moments last night when the president misspoke. There was the mixing up Egypt and Mexico when he talked about El-Sisi. But then there was also the boxes that were in the garage. And I think we got the picture of that we can put up. When the president said, everything that was found in my home was in a cabinet that was either lockable or locked. But as we saw from the photos of the boxes in his garage, they weren't even locked with Scotch tape. So yeah. Ben Domenech thinks that this is just going to be a self-reinforcing process where now every time that the president misspeaks between now and November, people will point back to this report and say it was right there in the 388 pages of this report, regardless of how Ian Sams is trying to spin it.
Yeah, well, I agree with Ben. This is going to be a reoccurring problem. The problem existed, however, before the report came out. That's why we had, 3/4 of the American people saying too old, 2/3 saying he didn't have the mental sharpness to do the job. And Ben's right. This is going to continue to grow, and we're going to remember this moment. We're going to remember other moments. And every time this happens, and every time he makes a verbal miscue and demonstrates a lack of memory, and every time he sort of shuffles and shows a lack of strength, this is going to continue to be a problem that grows and grows and grows.
I mean, you just go back to the very basics here, and Ian Sams, basically referencing it was his staff that gathered up these classified materials, and this is how it ended up in his possession. I mean, we know that the DOJ report reveals that Biden willfully retained and shared highly classified information. And then the spokesperson just now saying, quote, Biden did not intentionally take classified documents, did not intentionally. I mean, let's go back to the basics of the classified materials having to be read in a skiff. How else did they leave the room?
Yeah, well, look, this is not good for the former president. Now, granted, Mr. Sams made the argument that the special prosecutor was examining the issue of willfulness and did not find substantial evidence to affirm that charge enough to indict. So we're going to be left with sort of a, we're going to be left in a period where the ordinary person is going to try and make sense of this, and what they're going to say is Donald Trump took documents, he got indicted. Joe Biden took documents. He didn't get indicted. I think that's fundamentally unfair. Now, that'll be colored. If you're a Biden supporter, you're going to say, well, there's a difference. If you're a Trump supporter, you're going to say, really, there's no difference. But the people we're talking about are the people who are up for grabs in this election, about the 10 or 12 or 15% at most, who really are capable of moving between one candidate and another. And that's going to have an adverse effect for those people's attitude about President Biden, in my opinion.
Karl, thank you for hanging with us through the White House briefing. We know you got a busy day. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on the other side of that.
You bet. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.